Father jumped down to check a marker stake on the prairie. That was all he seemed to have done for the past week. He was muttering under his breath. Third range, Township 15, Section 9. Still not there, but we're getting close. Up till now, the journey had been exciting. In the spring, the Watkins had sold their rocky farm near Peterborough, Ontario, and set out to try their luck in the new lands opening up in the west. Now you could travel all the way by train. Tom loved the train. So many interesting people to look at and talk to. Many of the passengers had come from across the Atlantic Ocean and had been traveling for weeks. They were on the train for 2 days and 3 nights. Tom played checkers and dominoes with his little sister Tilly, but that never lasted long. They soon got bored. So whenever the train stopped for coal or water, Tom jumped off to look around. At Winnipeg, they left the train and joined hundreds of other homesteaders and immigrants in a tent city on the edge of town. This was home, until Father could make arrangements for the new farm and buy supplies and a wagon and a team of oxen to take them there with all their belongings. Tom went with Father on one of his visits to the land agent. Downtown Winnipeg was so busy, it made Peterborough seem like a sleepy village. They'd been on the prairie for 3 days now without seeing a farm or even any people. Where are we going, Tom thought, and how will we know when we get there? He couldn't believe it when Father checked yet another marker stake and then yelled, "This is it! This is our land!" The new farm wasn't quite as Tom had imagined. There were no buildings, no trees, no water, no nothing. How were they going to live? "I'll make a lean-to with the wagon," said Father. "Take the buckets, Tom, and go and get some water over by the willows." Oh no, all the way to the willows? What kind of farm was this? Tom trudged off with the buckets, while Father made a quick shelter with the wagon. This would be their new home, at least for a few weeks. Next morning, Father harnessed the oxen and started breaking up the prairie sod. It was already getting late for spring planting. Tom watched him start and then picked up the shotgun and headed back to the willows. He'd not only found water there in a slough, but hundreds of ducks and millions of mosquitoes. As the days went by, he found prairie chickens and pigeons and rabbits too. All this helped make the food they'd brought with them last as long as possible. While Father was planting the first crop of wheat, red fife, guaranteed to ripen before the first frost, or so the seed merchant in Winnipeg had said, Mother and Tom planted a vegetable garden. "Time to get started on the house," said Father one morning. "Come, Tom, we'll go find some poplars and cut them down to make into poles." The next task was to cut the tough prairie sod into giant bricks to make the walls. Not as easy as it seemed. The sods were as heavy as a bag of grain. Luckily, they had their first visitor that day. "Hello, I'm your neighbor, Jim McPhee. My farm is about 10 miles from here, over on Mosquito Creek. When I heard you'd moved in, I decided to come over and give you a hand." "Good job, I did. You need about an acre of sod to build a decent soddy. You wouldn't be finished before Christmas with that little shovel of yours. Slowly the house took shape. They used the lumber bought in Winnipeg to frame the door and the windows. The roof went on in layers. First, poles close together, lots of grass, and then government shingles, sods covered with more grass and dirt. The result was just as Mr. McPhee had described, a genuine soddy, solid Manitoba marble, cool in summer and warm in winter. But there's one small drawback. If it rains for a day outside, it drips for 3 days inside. It was nice to have a house again. During the next few weeks, Tom and Father added a lean-to for the animals. As the summer grew hotter, the wheat grew rapidly, and so did Tom's garden. But those cute little gophers that lived all around liked to eat them both. Their main food was still rabbits. Rabbit stew, rabbit pie, cold rabbit and oatmeal, tea, and rabbit surprise. It was a welcome change when Tom caught a fish. Tilly's favorite job was picking fresh berries and tasting them as she worked, of course. Cooking was very difficult until Father could go to town with the first harvest and buy a proper stove. Wash day was even less fun. The water had to be carried all the way from the slough. The prairies were beginning to feel like home. The only thing Tom really hated was that mile walk every day with 2 pails of water. In the raging heat of August, the slough shrank to a tiny puddle of green slime, barely enough to keep the mosquitoes alive. Time to dig a well. Again it was a neighbor, Pierre Goulet, who came to the rescue. He helped them dig a proper well. But best of all, he gave Tom and Tilly a puppy and promised that in the fall he would sell Mother a heifer calf. One day, when Father was away helping Mr. McPhee build a fence, Tom noticed strange low clouds moving quickly from the west, and heard Mother shout, "The prairie is on fire! Quick, Tom, fill everything you can find with water. Soak the roof and the lean-to, and then wet some grain sacks. Come with me to the fire break." Mr. Goulet had warned Father about prairie fires, and he had spent days plowing a fire break around the fields. "Don't let the fire jump the break," yelled Mother. "Smother the sparks as they land." "Oh, it's passing. I think we're going to be all right." They managed to beat it, but it was close. Without the new well, everything would have been lost. The wheat crop, the hayfields, and probably the house, too. When Father came home the next day, he was amazed to see the farm still there. He knew they'd saved themselves and the well, but he was sure everything else would be burned to a crisp. After the prairie fire, they all felt like true Westerners. This was home. But the next day, right after the hail and windstorm flattened most of the wheat, they weren't so sure. It didn't kill the wheat, but it sure made it harder to cut. The first harvest was hot, dirty work. Next year, Father said, we'll have a seed drill to plant a big crop and a binder to harvest it. But this year, everything has to be done by hand. Mr. McPhee and his hired man came over and helped thresh and haul the first cash crop to the new rail line. Now there would be money to buy Mother a proper kitchen stove. When the harvest was over, Mr. McPhee invited all the neighbors to his house for a harvest ball. There was music, dancing, card games, and mountains of delicious food. Now all we have to do is get through our first prairie winter, thought Tom one late fall day. Wonder if it'll get cold enough to go sliding on the slough.